Welcome to Poplar Spring Farm. I'm Kirsten Pankratz. We're a family of 10 living on a big piece of land in Southern Virginia where we enjoy homesteading and growing most of the food that we eat. Today I'm going to be talking about canning pork. My canning shelf is starting to look a little empty, so I'm going to can some pork and get it up on the shelf there. When I can beef, like I have on the top shelf right there, and I have some more right there next to the carrots, I can beef raw. I just pack it in raw because the beef that I've had to can has not had bone in it. However, when I can chicken and pork, I cook it down first and pick it off and then put it in my jar. So I am going to show you how I do that. And let me pull some pork out of the freezer. We took 3 pigs to the butcher in December, right after Christmas, and got the meat back a couple weeks ago, actually about a month ago. And we filled 3 freezers to the gills. This is the one we're using it out of first because we get a lot of frost buildup and it actually pops the door open. All right, let me see what we can find here. I pulled out 4 Boston butts. They each were about 3 pounds. And the way I thaw meat is to usually put it in a sink of really hot water for as long as it takes for the meat to thaw. So what I normally do for this kind of thing is after the supper dishes are washed, I go ahead and thaw my meat in the sink, and then I get it put in the crock pot before I go to bed. So this filled the crock pot pretty full. I've got a real big crock pot, and I didn't put anything on the meat, and I didn't add any water. It has enough fat that there would be juice in there. So I put it on at about 9:30 at night, and then I ran it on low until 9:30 the next morning. And that's how we normally cook meat if I want to use it during the day, the following day. So this is what it looks like when it came out of the crock pot to cool. You can see the bones are loose in there. I just pulled the meat off and chopped it all up to get that in my jars. Once it was chopped, I filled my jars, and then I always put a little salt and pepper on, about a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of pepper, and then I fill my jars within half an inch of the top of it with just warm water. Here I'm wiping the rims with a paper towel to make sure there's no grease or meat on them, and then just placing my lids on with the bands. And these I just make finger tight. You don't want to tighten them more than that because it can make the jars break. Putting lukewarm water in my canner. It's supposed to be about 3 inches deep, or about up to the knuckles on your fingers if you put your hand down in there. once the handles on the canner are clamped as tight as they can be just by hand, then I turn the burner on fairly high. I don't go all the way high, just about. And then we just wait for steam to start coming out of here. And when that happens, the gauge starts to go up, and I wait till the gauge is just about to 5. Some people time it for 10 minutes after steam starts coming out, and it's basically 10 minutes or so, and the gauge is just about to 5 or about halfway between, and plenty of steam is coming out right there. And when that happens, then we put this on. For me, it's 10. You have to look up for your altitude how much weight you put on. And then for meat, whether it's raw or it's already cooked, I can it for an hour and a half. And once the weight is on, I actually turn down the stove. I turn it down to just a little bit until the jiggler starts jiggling. And then I turn it down. For my stove, it's just above 2, or just below 2 is where it sits, and it jiggles. It's supposed to jiggle about 4 times a minute. I probably have it jiggle a little more than that. But this little thing makes noise. It jiggles back and forth, and it releases the steam because it keeps it to just about 10 pounds of pressure. And once it jiggles the first time, I put my timer on for an hour and a half or whatever length of time. I'm going to be doing some broth a little later, and that only cans for 20 minutes for pints. I'm doing pints. So whatever amount of time it is, once it jiggles, I put my timer on and I turn the stove down, and I just keep an ear on it. I might be in other parts of the house, but I just keep an ear on it, make sure it's still jiggling, and then we just wait for the timer to go off. Okay, you can see that the pressure is coming up, and you can hear this. I don't know if you can really see the steam at all, but the steam is coming out. It's been coming out for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and put my 10-pound weight on it. And you can see the pressure is starting to come on up. And my weight will start jiggling when it's about 10 pounds of pressure. Okay, hear that? That's the sound of the jiggler. And that's where my pressure sits when it's about at 10. So what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna turn this down to about 2, just under 2. And I'm gonna set the timer. And that's it. We just make sure that that jiggler goes off. We don't want our pressure to build up too high, so it goes on and off for about an hour and a half. Okay, when the timer went off, I went and turned the stove off, and then I just left the canner. You just have to let it cool down until the gauge here drops all the way back down. And you can leave it longer than that, but it at least needs to get that cool. And then at this point, the jiggler is still hot, so I always take it off with an oven mitt. You hear that little bit of steam coming out. And then once that's off, you can either leave it a little longer to cool a little bit more, because there's still steam in there. It's still pretty hot. Or you can go ahead and take the lid off at this point. The handles are always really tight after the canner has been on and it's gotten real hot. So I use oven mitts to break them loose. And then once I've gotten them loose, they're a lot easier to turn by hand. So then I just get them all loose by hand. And sometimes when I take the lid off, there's still a lot of steam coming out, and I just go slow. You don't want the jars to cool really, really quickly, because that can make them break. But if you're slow and you just go easy with it, it's fine. Okay, well that's the end of this canning project. I ended up canning up the broth also. After I took it out of the crock pot, I strained it through a wire colander, and then I put it in the fridge overnight so the fat would harden and I could pull it off. This morning, I put it in a pot to heat it and get it all liquid again so that I could can it up. And each of those jars will be a meal for us, and then each of these will be a meal for us. So one of the ways that we use the canned pork is I'll take a pint of the broth and put it in a pot with flour and salt and pepper and sort of make a gravy out of it, and then mix in the 1 jar of canned pork, and I'll serve that over mashed potatoes. Everyone in the family really likes that. And another way that we use it is for lunch meat. I don't buy lunch meat or anything like that from the grocery store. We don't actually buy any meat from the store, so I'll take a jar of this and mix it with salt and pepper and mayonnaise and mustard, and we'll eat that on homemade buns and make sandwiches out of it. So that's one of the ways that we use it also. So I've washed these up, and I'm going to go ahead and get them up here on my canning shelf.